Yeah, and I guess what I hope that, people take from our response is that we can do this for other things too. We can do this for the other diseases that we have here in New Zealand. We can do this for climate change.
So one thing about the COVID-19 response that I'm trying to build in, and that's the idea of a broad reset.
Build back better.
New World Order, Fourth Industrial Revolution, Great Reset. I thought that these were terms conspiracy theorists used. I was supposed to be embarrassed to mention these things. New World Order a year ago, or Fourth Industrial Revolution. What are you talking about? And yet that's exactly what those in charge of the most powerful nations in the world are saying, which means I have to start a new investigation here and now. Researcher James Corbett has spent years investigating and shouting from mountaintops. I've stood on stages with him. I've heard him talking about the New World Order, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and now this languaging of the Great Reset. So I gave him a call and said, can I ask you some questions? Because I'm just beginning a journey now. Maybe some of you are ahead of me on this, but I don't think it's a conspiracy theory anymore. I think this is a reality that we have got to start focusing on.
Well, thank you for having me here to talk about an extremely important subject. And let me just say welcome to the club, because I think we're all conspiracy theorists now that the conspiracy theory that the media has been attempting to gaslight us about over the past few months, there's no such thing as a Great Reset, is clearly being shoved in our face by the very same leaders that they're saying are totally not involved in any sort of plot.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change.
Pre-pandemic plans. Of course, this is a pre-pandemic plan that was in place, looking for a good excuse to launch it upon the world. Well, here is that excuse. And it is actually a particularly important excuse. It works on a number of levels, one of which comes directly from Klaus Schwab's Great Reset book, where he says the spread of infectious diseases has a unique ability to fuel fear, anxiety, and mass hysteria. In so doing, as we have seen, it also challenges our social cohesion and collective capacity to manage a crisis. Epidemics are by nature divisive and traumatizing. And if you go on in that passage, he talks about families, friends, and neighbors being pitted against each other and looking for some sort of solution. Well, don't worry, the World Economic Forum and their cronies have the solution for you, and they're calling it the Great Reset. I think that the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab in particular, are positioning themselves to be the central organizing body for this group of concepts that are being sold to the public under this Great Reset title. But that doesn't mean, I think, that they are pulling all the strings. This isn't the sort of conspiracy that people like to deride when they talk about conspiracy theories of a bunch of men in a smoky, shadowy room making secretive plans. I think this is out in the open, and it's because the convergence of a lot of different people who hold the same ideology essentially are agreeing on the main aspects of the way to better consolidate global control over the economy and thus the people of the world. And again, I think this COVID-19 crisis is just the perfect cover for that.
The great reset of all our economies, of all our societies, and of all our personal liberties. And remember, this isn't me putting forward this crazy conspiracy theory. This is them.
Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system.
We have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path. It is an opportunity we have never had before and may never have again. So we must use all the levers we have at our disposal, knowing that each and every one of us has a vital role to play.
History would look at this crisis as the great opportunity for reset.
In short, we need a great reset. We have to mobilize all constituents of our global society to work together. We must not miss this unique window of opportunity.
It is imperative that we reimagine, rebuild, redesign, reinvigorate, and rebalance our world.
What is and who are the World Economic Forum?
That's an excellent question. And I think for our purposes today, the most important member of the World Economic Forum that we're going to be talking about is Klaus Schwab, who is, as one would expect, a consummate insider of the global jet-setting elite. One might say the superclass, if one was informed of such things as David Rothkopf, who was a Henry Kissinger associate, basically mini Kissinger, wrote a book several years ago called Superclass, where he basically said, these crazy conspiracy theorists think there's just this handful of people that run the world. Well, there kind of is. There is this transnational elite who get to set the international agenda through not any particular organization, but just being part of these connected organizations like the World Economic Forum. And Klaus Schwab, of course, is the founder and the executive chairman of that organization right now. It was founded in 1971, and of course, it's based in Switzerland. It's most famous for its annual retreat at Davos. Every year, the world elite, quote unquote, get to hobnob and shindig in Davos and spend a week or two just basically attending different seminars and talking about the global agenda, which they like to think that they are setting, and perhaps they are. I think their official mission statement is to, quote, they're committed to improving the state of the world by engaging business, political, academic, and other leaders of society to shape global, regional, and in industry agendas. And if that sounds like a pretty grandiose mission statement, well, you're starting to get the sense of what this organization is aiming at.
Can you tell me how you describe the Great Reset? How would you describe it in like an elevator pitch?
The Great Reset is essentially a marketing ploy for a very old plan. It has been referred to time and time again as the New World Order or things like that, but that's a bit 20th century kind of rhetoric. No, we need a new branding package for the same old globalist ideas. Let's call it the Great Reset and couple it with the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is a term that was coined by the same people who are trying to coin this Great Reset term and put it into circulation, namely Klaus Schwab and his associates at the World Economic Forum. And essentially, it's about global control of the human population on a scale never before imaginable or possible or feasible through technological means as well as economic and monetary means to essentially control the human population and eventually, long term, ultimately bring the human population down to a more manageable level and replace the human population with robots and automation, which sounds like crazy sci-fi stuff. Unless you actually follow the news, the headlines, read the white papers, and actually read the materials that they document about the Great Reset at the World Economic Forum website. Probably the best way to visualize what we're talking about here, because it's hard to get your mind around that concept of this global political, business, academic, industry, education, everything, trying to basically set a global agenda for all of this. If you want to get your mind around that and actually have a visual view of it, you need to look at the COVID-19 transformation map just to see what this looks like. And essentially, this is one of those spaghetti graphs where everything links to everything else. But around this concept of COVID-19, they have plotted out absolutely everything that you can possibly think of. Some of the categories here, how this is going to affect aerospace or migration, geopolitics, China, the US, European Union, etc., automotive industry, geoeconomics, the future of economic progress, the future of health and healthcare, vaccination, workforce and employment, humanitarian action, justice and law, cities and urbanization, the Great Reset, values, inclusive design, internet governance. I mean, literally anything that you can think of is part of this graph. And every single one of those collects dozens, sometimes hundreds of different articles and videos all around the subject and how COVID-19 is influencing all of these different areas. That's one way. When you start clicking through on that and seeing all of these different connections and how this has all been plotted out, you start to get the sense of what this really means. This isn't just rhetoric. This isn't just feel-good nonsense that's being spouted. This is a coordinated agenda that's happening at a global level. And we better take this seriously because there are very rich, very powerful, very influential people who are taking this deadly seriously.
Indeed, the so-called experts at the World Economic Forum in 2016 fantasized about what 2030 will look like and came up with what they described as utopia. And I quote, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing. I have no privacy. And life has never been better. the World Economic Forum's experts predicted. But how do the World Economic Forum and the United Nations intend to bring about this utopia of theirs, this great reset they keep promising us? Well, they need national and state governments and other bodies to play along. And one of the key tools they are using is a three-word slogan: Build Back Better.
An ambitious and responsible vision of how to build Canada back better.
And now is the time for all of us to begin to build back better.
Building Back Better has also been Joe Biden's campaign slogan, as explained here by Elizabeth Warren.
Build it back better. We're going to take an economy that had a lot of problems and we're going to make this economy work better going forward.
And spot the pattern, because Build Back Better was also the slogan that Jacinda Ardern won her recent New Zealand election with.
And over the next 3 years, there is much work to do. We will build back better from the COVID crisis.
Now is the precise time that we should be asking ourselves, what next? Because we are navigating new waters and we all have a role to play in what comes next. Now, I don't have a chance to read every single letter that comes my way, but I do make a point of reading all of the letters that come from children. And so it was one day, while in the midst of a pile of letters from both children and adults, that I read one that had a very simple phrase in it that stood out to me. It's a phrase that is common in the space of aid, development and resilience. But in amongst COVID, letters from children and all the challenges we're facing, these three letters seemed perfectly timed. Build back better.
Medical experts now acknowledge that lockdowns don't work. They see that treatment with hydroxychloroquine and zinc does work. And the government responses globally have led to a massive destruction of wealth, well-being and work. Now, none of that makes any sense until you open your mind to consider if there's another agenda at work here. It's one we've seen before, but now it has a new name. It's called the Great Reset. Here's Klaus Schwab, the founder and chairman of the World Economic Forum.
The COVID-19 crisis has shown us that our old systems are not fit anymore for the 21st century. It has laid bare the fundamental lack of social cohesion, fairness, inclusion and equality.
These globalists have now hitched their ambition to COVID-19. Just think about it. The global response to COVID-19 has been a green socialist's dream. Consider their policy agenda and compare it with what's going on. Reduce fossil fuel use? Check. Next to no international travel? Check. Welfare for all? Check. Civil liberties curtailed? Check. Government by bureaucrats? Check.
Beaming in from Wellington and our studio today is a triple whammy from Screen Left, Michael Baker, Susie Wiles and Sean Hendy, looking like the back seat of a particularly cool bus.
And I guess what I hope that, people take from our response is that we can do this for other things too. We can do this for the other diseases that we have here in New Zealand. We can do this for climate change. And I think we should not underestimate, actually, the kind of soft power now that New Zealand has, that we can really be an exemplar for how to be a good society, how to use evidence in the right way, and we're not doing it for everything. So I think we can show that actually, why wouldn't we do this for other things?
I'm very pleased to be contributing to this course today on countering disinformation in the age of COVID-19. So one thing about the COVID-19 response that I'm trying to build in, and this obviously doesn't always apply, but I think other key messages, co-benefits, and that's the idea of a broad reset to increase our focus and ability to manage major global health threats. The fact that most New Zealanders want a green recovery, a more equitable society, and the fact that we need to invest in public health infrastructure. This must be one of the best opportunities we'll ever have to build up that thinking and hopefully capacity in this area.
I know that climate change is a challenge that's going to define our American future. I know meeting the challenge will be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to jolt new life into our economy, strengthen our global leadership, protect our planet for future generations. If I have the honor of being elected president, we're not just going to tinker around the edges. We're going to make historic investments that will seize the opportunity and meet this moment in history.
And let me tell you what I'm grappling with. I'm grappling with my own family members right now, right? I have family and friends. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. I was an environmentalist. I believe in clean air and food and water. It's what puts me in this position right now. Yet I hear these buzzwords that are being used in this reset, right? All working together, coming together for, equality and balance in ecosystems and in business, a new way forward. Yet now the tone of that, I don't think could be better, exemplified by Klaus Schwab. When I listen to him, I'm like, those sound like really pretty words, but there's something terrifying about hearing it from this guy. But what is the disconnect? Why is it I have no longer feel safe with the concept of being an environmentalist when I'm looking at the world agenda around this? How are they manipulating? Are they manipulating it, or have I just lost my way?
I think they are manipulating this, and we can see this from a number of different vectors, and you are not alone in that. I think there are a great many number of people out there who are similarly interested in saving and preserving the environment and all of these things. We know that we are a part of an ecosystem and we have to be responsible for protecting it, etc. And I think that impulse is what is played on when they start launching this type of spiel about equality, sustainability, inclusiveness. These are the buzzwords that they are using to sell an agenda to us. And one way to grapple with that idea of how these words can be used to sell ideas that are in fact harmful to us is to look at a word like equality. Again, I think most people feel uncomfortable with the idea of some people having billions and billions of dollars in their bank account and other people literally starving in the gutter. It would be better if we could have a more equal society in terms of the distribution of wealth, so people aren't literally starving to death while others have more money than they could possibly use in their lifetime. But there are many different ways to achieve that sort of equality, and one of which would be simply to make all of the peasants, essentially neo-peasants on the neo-feudal plantation, you're all equally poor under the eyes of this system. That would be one way to achieve equality. So just the word equality itself does not necessarily mean this is going to be some sort of utopia or nirvana. We have to understand what it is they are actually proposing. And when you start to pick that apart and you start to get at the underlying message of what they're pushing here, you start to get at concepts like the fourth industrial revolution.
To date, there have been 3 industrial revolutions. The first happened in the late 1700s with the invention of the steam engine, which led to the creation of factories and a booming textile industry. In the late 1800s, the second industrial revolution was marked by mass production, as well as new industries like steel and electricity. And the third happened in the late 1900s, which saw the invention of the computer and the internet. Now, the fourth industrial revolution describes the emergence of artificial intelligence and how it integrates more with humans. Artificial intelligence, or AI, can already be seen in our daily lives, from how we check out at the supermarket to how we check in for a flight. But it's far more advanced than most people realise. In August 2020, entrepreneur Elon Musk gave a demo of his new company, Neuralink. Connected to our brains with tiny wires, this microchip is synced with AI, enabling humans to control anything, from prosthetic limbs to computer games. This working proof of concept has already been fitted into people. It has the potential to completely transform the way we interact online.
So there's actually a lot of functions that this device could do related to monitoring your health and warning you about a possible heart attack or stroke or other damage, as well as sort of convenience features like playing music. You can do a lot. It's sort of like if your phone went at your brain or something.
It's a cyborg. It's a combination. It's a combination of electronics and biology.
Yeah. Things are getting more and more connected.
Will you call me?
Sorry?
Will you call me?
You mean telephone me?
Yes.
Where?
Now.
But you're sitting right here.
This is why I wanted to have lunch. You just phone me. Now. Hello, Bethany speaking.
Hello.
You phoning for Bethany?
Yes. What are you doing?
This is Bethany. Can you hear me?
Well, you're right in front of me.
But can you hear me down the phone?
Oh my God.
This is me. On the phone, I had it implanted. My hand is the phone. I can walk and talk because I'm on the phone inside my hand. I am the phone. This is what phones are going to be from now on. I have integrated. Thank you for your call.
This is Klaus Schwab, the author of this book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution. He's also the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, which is funded by the largest global enterprises and whose members include CEOs, heads of state and government ministers from countries such as the UK and US.
The fourth industrial revolution will impact our lives completely. It will not only change how we communicate, how we produce, how we consume, it will change actually us, our own identity.
Schwab has written extensively about humanity being altered by machines, nanotechnology. He's a big fan of drones, artificial intelligence. Weirdly enough, Daniel Andrews recently ditched attempts to detain people on the suspicion that they might be about to disobey COVID regulations, has eerie echoes in Schwab's boasting how technologies can intrude into the hitherto private space of our minds, reading our thoughts and influencing our behaviour. And Schwab predicts, as capabilities in this area improve, the temptation for law enforcement agencies and courts to use techniques to determine the likelihood of criminal activity, assess guilt, or even possibly retrieve memories directly from people's brains will increase. All of this, Schwab says, is redefining what it means to be human. Sounding like a demented character in a Batman comic, Schwab also writes gleefully that sensors, memory switches and circuits can be encoded in human gut bacteria, and that smart dust, arrays of full computers with antennas, can now organize themselves inside the body.
From bioelectronics to nanorobotics to synthetic biology, ever more incredible technologies are being pioneered that, whether or not they are marketed to the public under the catch-all term of vaccine, will operate in ways that are fundamentally unlike anything before used on the human population. University of Ottawa researchers are working on creating edible vaccines. Researchers at Harvard Medical School are developing autonomous DNA nanorobots capable of transporting molecular payloads directly into cells. A team of scientists at Johns Hopkins University are working on shape-changing microdevices called Theragrippers that can reside in the GI tract to aid in extended drug delivery. Nanobots, shape-changing bioelectronic devices, remote-controlled vaccines. This is not the stuff of science fiction, but of science fact. And the precedent that is being set during the COVID era to rush experimental and unproven medical technologies into use on the back of a declared crisis is the same precedent that could be used to foist these injectable technologies on the public in the future.
Up until now, the conversation we've been having is around freedom of speech. Once we can access people's thoughts and access people's emotions, we have to create a space that enables people to think freely, to think divergent thoughts, to think creative thoughts. And in a society where people fear having those thoughts, the likelihood of being able to enjoy progress is significantly diminished.
We are wondering what is happening to the world. Everything is changing.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change.
Our bodies will be so high-tech, we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
Now, James, to me, this entire scenario that we are living in right now is not by chance. I do not believe that this is an accident. I believe this is by design. Problem, reaction, solution. We have the problem, the coronavirus. We have the reaction, the locking down of billions of people, controlled demolition of the economy, wiping out the middle class, civil unrest, more people becoming more dependent upon this government and this system of control, and essentially destroying this current system only to have the same World Economic Forum that hosted Event 201 announce their proposed solution, which is, of course, the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
But let me bring up from COVID-19, the Great Reset by Klaus Schwab. If no one power can enforce order, our world will suffer from a global order deficit. Unless individual nations and international organizations succeed in finding solutions to better collaborate at the global level, we risk entering an age of entropy in which retrenchment, fragmentation, anger, and parochialism will increasingly define our global landscape, making it less intelligible and more disorderly. It goes on to say, when confronted with it, some industry leaders and senior executives may be tempted to equate reset with restart, hoping to go back to the old normal and restore what worked in the past, traditions, tested procedures, and familiar ways of doing things. In short, a return to business as usual. This won't happen because it can't happen. For the most part, business as usual died from, or at the very least was infected by, COVID-19.
So people assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again in how we are used to normal, in the old fashion. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen. The cut which we have now is much too strong in order not to leave traces.
I mean, the guy is basically saying, I know you think you have a president of the United States of America, but that's of no interest to us. We want a larger centralized power over the world. That is how we get to the place of order. And of course, as you well know, order is in that idea of, a stabilized planet, and humanity is exactly what we read about in Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, or 1984. These were what they were predicting. Our desire to control and create a perfect utopian world would mean we would all have to turn into some sort of automatron. Is that where we're heading? Is there any stopping this?
What is taking place right now, and what is the agenda?
Well, I've been writing about technocracy and speaking about it for a number of years now, as you know, and about globalization in general for decades. The thing that I talk about most is technocracy right now, because I believe that is and has been the major thread of history leading up to where we are today. And I do believe, starting with this great panic of 2020 that I call it, not just the pandemic, but the great panic of 2020, we have essentially a technocrat coup d'etat that's happened, not just in our country, it's the whole world. And the seriousness of this whole thing is just so immense. Aside from the physical virus part of it, we just kind of put that aside for a bit. The reaction to it and the control mechanisms that have been set in place since then indicates to me that the technocrats who were pushing technocracy globally have finally succeeded in springing the trap on the entire planet.
Technology is going to be used to get us to a new economic system. And once you start to understand the implications of that, for example, the implication that everyone will be closely surveilled at all times, electronically and at a distance, and all of their transactions will be monitored and run through a central bank digital currency, which will be monitoring everything that you are doing at all times. Of course, all of this data is necessary for keeping us safe from disease, say, which is, of course, the way it will be sold to us.
Is destroying our economy and those, as you've talked about, those sort of mom and pop businesses, how does that fit into the Great Reset? I mean, it seems to me they're destroying the very people that they're speaking to, saying we're going to make an even playing ground. Well, the even playing ground, none of us is going to be a Walmart. None of us is going to be a Costco or an Amazon. Shouldn't we all be more like the little butcher shop that just focuses on, organic meats, or a cheese store, or, someone that just has their own wine business and they grow their grapes? And yet that's exactly what appears to be being destroyed by our approach to this pandemic. How does that play into the larger picture of the Great Reset or the Fourth Industrial Revolution?
Well, actually, this is an exceptionally important point that goes to the heart of the ideology behind this Great Reset idea, which is one of centralization of control. What we need is a centralized system that's coordinated by a few technical elites who will essentially rule over the system for everyone's good, for equality and inclusiveness and all the other warm, fuzzy buzzwords that they say. But ultimately, that is not what this is about. It is about centralization of control, and that cannot really fully be consolidated as long as everyone is running their own independent business and is essentially able to provide for themselves. No, we have to be beholden essentially to a centralized system. And one way to do that is essentially to collapse the independent economy, to make sure that the big multi-country, multinational global corporations like Amazon and Walmart and what have you are fine and protected. They're essential services. But the grocer on the corner running his own independent business, now that's non-essential, so we'll have to close it down, which again may seem counterintuitive to people. Well, why would the people in charge of the country want to crash the economy? But it's because that crisis, of that economic crisis, opens up the doors to all sorts of other controls that can come in. And something that has been flaunted and touted for years now, including by Klaus Schwab in his Fourth Industrial Revolution book and subsequent speeches, is the idea of universal basic income, which is now gaining this idea a lot of momentum now. Well, if we can't provide for ourselves because we can't even open our own business, well, the government will have to do it. They'll have to provide a universal basic income, which sounds great until you start hearing the idea, well, this is a social responsibility that we'll have to make sure that we're contributing to society. So it will come with the sort of, well, have you gotten your vaccine? Have you complied with all of the health regulations? If not, maybe you won't get your UBI stipend. So this is actually the culmination of that centralization that is at the root of the Great Reset. And we're going to start seeing that reflected in all sorts of different ways, including the monetary paradigm itself, as they're starting to talk about central bank digital currencies, which will be able to drop that UBI directly into your wallet every month, as long as you comply with the authorities.
Suddenly, somehow, a virus has eliminated people's access to quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies, and even dollars. Clearly, we're all moving over to digital currencies.
What COVID-19 is the institution of controls necessary to convert the planet from democratic process to technocracy. So what we're watching is a change in control and an engineering of new control systems. So think of this as a coup d'etat. It's much more like a coup d'etat than a virus. I describe the new system as the end of currencies. So we're not bringing in a new currency. We're essentially bringing in a new transaction system that will be all digital and essentially end currencies as we know them. So what they're trying to do involves essentially all the money on the planet. So it's big, it's complicated, it's messy. And the challenge they have is, how do you market a system that if people understood it, nobody would want? I would describe this as a slavery system. So we're talking about shifting out of freedom, where we have freedom to roam and freedom to say what we want, into a complete control system 24/7. Now, the challenge before us is if the committee that runs the world, my nickname being Mr. Global, if Mr. Global wants to go to a slavery system and we want to remain a human civilization, then we have a fundamental disagreement. And that is the disagreement before us.
We will not comply. Let them figure that one out. We will not comply with your plans. We will not be socially engineered. We will not be manipulated into, scrambling our mind into making us instruments of fear. We simply not going to play ball with you. And I'll tell you, if Americans don't stand up at this point, I fear the whole thing's going to be down the toilet really soon, really fast. We have an opportunity. We have an opportunity. If we take advantage of it, it might have a really positive outcome. If we don't take advantage of it, I can tell you where the outcome's going. They're going to trap us into a scientific dictatorship. And I have to say, even the author of Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, said there's no good reason ever to escape from scientific dictatorship. He was right. I don't think there is either. If it ever gets their its claws into your flesh, you won't get loose from it. This is the essence of scientific dictatorship. Once it gets its claws in you, you can't get them out. So we have an opportunity. The great risk, but we have opportunity right now to stand up as Americans, just make the biggest stink they ever saw. And they need to see America saying in unison, we will not comply. We will not comply with you. Americans need to really get steamed and to get active and to get working. And there's just no time to waste.